Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Saladin Panas of that card was arse. Jack Slack, it's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you following Netflix MMA, baby, and then whatever slop the UFC counter-programmed that with. They basically didn't break their stride. They did announce Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway during Big Francis's walkout, but I don't understand why you'd need to change the channel to watch the announcement. The announcement's done. Once you find out the fight's official, that's it. You're going to go and watch the hype video? What are you, a simpleton? So the rest of the card was just, the usual bits and pieces. Co-main was nice, main was nice. Juan Diaz was a nice surprise. Then it really just hard work. Let's talk Netflix MMA first, because that's what's got everyone talking. Gina Carano versus Ronda Rousey. Foregone conclusion. If you knew anything about fighting, you knew that this was what was going to happen. If you didn't know anything about these two particular athletes, you only need to look at the fact that Gina Carano hasn't fought in 17 years. And definitely hasn't been doing athletic stuff. She's been acting. Ronda Rousey, WWE, may be scripted and acting, but it is physical activity. You really notice that The Rock can't be 300 pounds when he was wrestling regularly in 40-minute matches or whatever. More than that, Gina Carano, striker, best wrestler she fought. Chris Cyborg beat her. Before that, maybe Rosie Sexton in her second fight, and she was about 25 pounds heavier than Rosie Sexton. I saw some people being like, in fact, I'm going to read you this comment because it just tickled me. Some dude on Reddit MMA says, Ronda Rousey could not seriously compete in MMA with anyone who is not completely washed up. That's delusional. Or just not understand. That's imagining a better world in your head than actually exists. Because Eileen Perez and Macy Chasson are ranked in the top 10 of the UFC bantamweight division right now. Every single women's fight has at least 2 headlock throws, where the person being thrown can't defend it, and then the person who does the throw ends up losing control and the opponent coming up towards their back. Happens every fucking fight. I mean, it's not a bantamweight fight, but it was the first thing that happened in the first fight on this card between Shauna Bannon and Nicole Calieri. The difference was that Ronda Rousey throws people on their heads, maintains control, and armbars them. If you don't think that her in shape could still be most women in the UFC, I don't know what you're buying, because her issue was running into Holly Holm, who really did operate a fantastic game plan, was an exceptionally strong wrestler, despite her boxing background, and just showed her up in the footwork. And then Amanda Nunes, who is the only woman in the world who hits hard. There is no one else in that division who could chin her, basically. Juliana Pena was champion, and she got submitted by Jermaine Durandamy. So it ain't strong. But anyway, all that talk about throwing people on their heads, Ronda Rousey didn't even do that. She came out and did something that she's never done before. She level changed, which is one of the main criticisms of her style, was that her way to the clinch was to throw punches and absorb punches on her face and grab the opponent. She didn't have level changes. One of the things about Kayla Harrison is that she came from judo. She went to American Top Team, a real team for a start, not Glendale Fight Club with Edmund Knobhead. And instead of just hitting pads and looking cool hitting pads, or trying to, she actually learned to level change, get into takedowns, use fence work, and do a load of things that Ronda really didn't do that much. Ronda did work with Justin Flores, J-Flow, and he does have some interesting wall work, and she did show some interesting wall work against, who was that Olympian she kneed in the body? But at any rate, she level changed, and not only did she level change and show something new, but in the first second of the fight, Gina Carano did the thing you should never do against grapplers if you're a striker: step up inside low kick. Because you're bringing your back foot up underneath you, you're standing on one leg, it's got a telegraph, and it takes longer than a regular low kick anyway. It's shorter than a regular low kick because your anchoring foot is further away than if you were throwing your right leg and anchored on your left, or pivoting, whatever you want to say. It's the dumbest thing to throw against someone you think is going to take you down. And she did it right off the bat. Taken down, elbowed from mount a little bit, big sit into S mount. The thing about Ronda Rousey's armbars is that they're very dynamic. They're not like smothering control. She just goes, right, I'm going for the armbar now. Look at my fucking weird hips. I was reading her mother's book a couple of months ago, which is good. Check it out. It's called Winning on the Ground. And it basically sums up their philosophy, which was every throw has to end in an armbar. every reversal has to end in an armbar. And it's this really weird style of judo that she's got that has made her so special in MMA. But in that book, you can see when she sits to what we would call S-mount, she does like the stanky leg. Her leg is up behind her. She's got some weird fucking hips. And that allows her to just throw herself through these arm bars. She's not like, if you watch someone like, has Bea Mesquita got any arm bars in MMA? Gilbert Burns has. But if you watch someone like Paulo Filho back in the day, jiu-jitsu savant in Pride FC, finished everyone with armbar from the mount. He was very similar to Sean Brady in some aspects, which I've mentioned last episode. But his was very methodical, like punch them in the face, crawl your way up, start moving into S-mount, don't let them move, lean towards their legs and keep all your weight on their ribs as you pass the leg over their head. Whereas Ronda Rousey is just very much like, I'm fucking going for it, and she gets it every time. You know, I think people are blinded by the fact that she is annoying, and that this was a squash match, but she has a talent that was it was unique in MMA. Her skill set is completely unique, and you know, you can get distracted by the silly shadow boxing and stuff. And there is another thing to it, like her and Gina both have something that very few in women's MMA have, that they can actually crack a bit. Doesn't matter that Ronda's shadow boxing looks fucking stupid. She can crack a bit. But anyway, 17-second victory. Got a lot of talk out of that. Lots to talk about, like this versus the UFC. I am actually like pleased that this was the most viewed thing in ages, and the Tapology said that this is the most activity they've seen on their site ever, which is really surprising. You know, it wasn't the best card. It wasn't... They did make an effort, and some of the stuff that was good fell through. So there was a really good fight on here between Lorenz Larkin and Jason Jackson, the ass-kicking machine. That's two probably top 30 welterweights in the world. Very, very good guys. Jackson beat Amosov like a year and a half ago. And watching the way that Amosov fought in his last one, it's exactly the same way that Jackson took him apart. Like, Jackson could do it again tomorrow. Not saying he'd win the UFC welterweight title or whatever, or anything, but he has worked out one of the top contenders and would beat him again probably. And that fight fell through, and he ended up fighting a guy called Jeff Creighton and knocking him out in 20 seconds. So that was like a squash match, but it would have been a good match if it had been Lorenz Larkin versus Jason Jackson. And then Adriana Moraes was supposed to fight Muhammad Mokaev, and Mokaev got stuck with visa issues. As someone pointed out, wouldn't it be great to have your promoter be best friends with the president when that happens? Because if you remember, Khamzat Chimaev couldn't fight in the US for a very long time, and then suddenly he could. But I thought Fumi Nkuta gave a great account of himself in place of Muhammad Mokaev there. It was a very controversial ending because it was a submission held beyond the bell, and Herb Dean called it a technical submission because Nkuta went to sleep, but it looked like that was after the bell. And even if it wasn't after the bell, the guy still held the choke after the bell, so you probably should DQ him. I realise I think probably most of the people who listen to the podcast will have heard of Palhares, but it's been so long. Palhares is a really unique case in MMA because he was cut from the UFC for being too dangerous, which is weird because that's as real as it gets. But he was one of the few guys who's actually consistently great with the heel hook, and he also held them too long. So if you fought Palhares and you lost, you would tap, and he'd still shred your ACL and basically take you out of action for a year. And a lot of people, when they get ACL injuries, that's life-changing, career-changing at least, because you come back and you start protecting it. You start fighting differently. You start being scared to do things on it, even subconsciously. But anyway, co-main was Mike Perry versus Nate Diaz. This looked like it could have been a lot of fun. And then it was reminded that Mike Perry's actually always been a pretty decent fighter strategically, tactically, and a good clinch fighter. And Nate Diaz is washed as hell, but he's also a pretty fun clinch fighter. So there was some fun stuff going on in this one. Like Mike Perry's beating him up with elbows and knees and holding the single collar tie. And he had like a cross collar tie. So his right hand on the right side of Diaz's head, and he's kneeing him. And Diaz just wraps the arm and goes into a Haragoshi and throws him, which was sick, but he almost gave up his back doing it. Yeah, this was like watching someone with... Nate Diaz has a nice jab and good technique on his jab, and you could see him landing it and snapping Mike Perry's head back, but getting completely battered in between. And it's like that little bit of technique is all that's holding you together because you're like all your athletic abilities have completely disappeared. We got another shot at the both Diaz brothers hated being hit in the body and loved hitting other people in the body. One thing that's always been true about like combat sports and martial arts, if someone likes an offensive technique, there's a good chance someone did it to them and they didn't like it. And then they went, I'm fucking having that. But more than that, I was always just like, why is no one hitting these guys in the body when they've got iron skulls? And every time you try and hit them in the head, you get dragged into an exchange where you eat 3 punches. Basically, everyone who's ever hit the Diaz brothers in the body has had great success doing it. They have like DC level reactions to being hit in the body. So Mike Perry hit him with a couple of right hooks to the body here and folded him in half. Sliced him open, probably with those elbows from the clinch, but got the win by cuts. Even, to be honest, Nate's guard work looked good even. He's very technically good, but also really technically flawed because, like, this is a fight where Mike Perry could have low kicked him to death, but chose not to. Anyone who's ever thrown a low kick at Nate Diaz has had success doing it because he stands side on to throw his jab like on a straight line and put his whole body behind his lead shoulder. It's very strange. Like, he's technically good, but they, like his brother, they're both technically good. They are clearly learning and develop, or they were always clearly learning and developing new stuff and coming along. But they also would ignore massive holes that their choice of game left open. The one exception would be like Nate Diaz versus Anthony Pettis, where he came out just every time he walked towards Pettis, he lifted up his lead leg like he was faking a teep, but it wasn't even really faking it. He was just lifting his leg high and then stepping in behind it. And Pettis had a horrible time because Nate kept him under pressure, so he just kept backing him towards the fence, and then there is only a set amount of time you can kick before you're being pushed to the fence. But yeah, Nate Diaz's clinch game has always been underrated. I mean, that's how he beat up Conor McGregor in their first one. But man, the second Conor McGregor fight, Conor McGregor works out that Nate Diaz is walking at him with the bull guard with his hands really high and his head down, and he's taking everything on his forehead. And then in round 5, Conor McGregor goes, oh, what if I hit his body? And like every time he hits Nate Diaz in the body, Nate almost retches. So that was sad. And it's even sadder that the guy they've got in charge of this MVP MMA stuff, they asked him what his next headliners would be. And he said, oh, maybe Gina or Ronda versus Holly Holm. Maybe Nate Diaz versus Mike Perry 2. And it's like, you've just listed 3 fucking dreadful fights. Well done, mate. We're going to have Mike Perry versus Nate Diaz 2 because it's so controversial. However, back in the prime of Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz, that fight could have gone exactly the same way, and the Diaz fans would have insisted that the Diaz brother was robbed of his comeback. Francis Ngannou versus Felipe Linds. This was fucking weird from the start because it's Francis Ngannou. He's not provably the best heavyweight in the world anymore, but he was the best heavyweight in the world for a little while, left, went to boxing, did argue, I mean, he should have beaten Tyson Fury, who was the heavyweight champion at the time, in a boxing match. Came back, smashed Henan Ferreira. You know, he's still clearly among the best. Like, no matter how much you don't like him and no matter how much you don't think he's been fighting the best guys, you have to consider that Waldo Cortez Acosta and Josh Hockett are in the top 5. And Sergey Pav, who Ngannou would eat up, to be honest. But honestly, this fight, like, it was very silly because Felipe Linds was a light heavyweight. He left the UFC on a 4-fight winning streak, which is great, but he'd been a heavyweight and lost a couple of times there and come down to light heavyweight. He came into this fight 220, and Francis Ngannou came to this fight like 257. And you were just looking at them going, you shouldn't be here, mate. No matter how tough you are, I have massive respect, but very... And then we found out he was doing it for $100,000, and Francis was getting like $1 million. But, you know, say what you want, Linds was game. He was getting cracked with a counter left hook constantly, which is something that... Basically, Ngannou beat up Tyson Fury, one of the best heavyweights of the generation, by trying to time the counter left hook every time he stepped in and not allowing him to clinch. The amount of Fury's game that hinges on just clinching people when he's uncomfortable, or when he wants a break, or when he's up on the round and he wants to waste some time. Incredible. Couldn't do that to Ngannou. Now, AJ came out and smoked Ngannou, and that was a very impressive performance, and I'm not saying that Ngannou... Well, I suppose he is among the best boxers in the world if he beat Tyson Fury, but I'm not saying that he's going to win the heavyweight title of the world as a boxer. I'm just saying that he had a skill set that is very difficult to deal with for certain fighters. I mean, he's a monstrously built man with enormous hitting power. And the other thing is he's very coachable. He came back from boxing. He started working with Eric Nixick again. I think he went to Eric Nixick and that team for the boxing match. But then he started working MMA with them. And he fights Henan Ferreira. Henan Ferreira, he takes him down. Henan Ferreira comes up on the underhook from half guard. Francis is waiting for the underhook, folds him down on the near shoulder and just beats the shit out of him. I've never seen Francis do that. You know, just compare fight 1 with Stipe with fight 2 with Stipe. And then this fight, you saw some new stuff again. Like he got He grabbed Felipe Linds over the head in a guillotine attempt, but with his back to the fence. Felipe Linds is trying to step his knee to the middle along the fence. What Danaher calls knee jousting, but if you get your knee to the center, you can start throwing the guy over it. The classic DC, aka sequence. And Ngannou knees him in the body, brings his knee back down, pinches his knees together around Felipe Linds' knee to keep his knee from coming to the fence between Ngannou's legs. And then he steps his other foot on top of Felipe Linds' foot and then pivots around it on the ball of the foot on top of Felipe Linds' foot to put his foot and knee back inside of Felipe Linds' leg while standing on his foot. And then there was another bit in the clinch later where he's just standing on Felipe Linds' foot. And like, damn, it's so cool that you're still developing stuff. And he's coming out of the clinch with elbows. He's beating him up with knees. Knocked him out with a left hook and then another left hook in a little exchange. But it was the clinch fighting that was really interesting to me, because if Francis Ngannou started pushing people to the fence and munching their body up with knees and body shots, he would be a horrible task for anyone. Because what are you going to do? Beat him out in the open? He also came out and immediately threw a low kick, which I loved. It's like, yeah, I've been boxing, but I'm back now. So a very silly fight, but, you know, I just can't get over that. I'd love to see Francis Ngannou back in the mix. I want to see Francis versus Tom Aspinall. They got John Jones there pretending he's going to do shit. John Jones he signed an 8-fight contract with the UFC last time, and he did 2 of them. There is no way he's ever going to fight Ngannou. He spent 3 years refusing to fight Ngannou. And the moment Ngannou left, he was like, right, I'm ready for heavyweight now. He did the same shit with Tom Aspinall. He's just a bullshit artist. And he says that his hip has arthritis. Like, why does anyone give this dude the time of day? He's not a serious fighter anymore. But you know why Netflix MMA did it, because it's just like, yeah, whoa, why is Dana not letting why is Dana not letting us have a huge fight, eh? The other interesting thing on this card was that Saladin Panase was on it, or Panas, depending on how we're saying it. He is very, very good. He's been 3-weight champion in Octagon, or KSW, can't remember which, but basically he got $500,000 a fight from, I think it was KSW for a while. And he was like, sorry, the UFC's only offering me a Contender Series. I'm going to take the $500,000 a fight. Now, it seems like that's fallen through because he's a free agent again. He's looking at the UFC's offers, allegedly. But we miss out on guys like him and Vartanyan, who are legitimately world-class fighters. You can be like, oh, they've never beaten anyone in the top 10. It's like the top 10 is entirely UFC guys by design. But if you know anything, you can watch a fighter and go, damn, he's pretty good. I understand the level of opposition, but he's pretty fucking talented. I would like to see him in the UFC, and money is not an issue for them, but they are making it an issue. So Saladin Panase is 28, and he's fighting this lad, Kenneth Cross. I thought Kenneth Cross came out and gave a great account of himself. He tried to wrestle immediately, and Saladin Panase, cool as a fucking cucumber, mate. He's scrambling up. He's threatening takedowns on Kenny Cross. And then the moment Kenny Cross gets a little bit out of gas, minute 4 of round 1, Saladin Panase pushes him to the fence and goes, right, have a right hook to the body, mate. And Kenneth Cross goes, oh no. And then Saladin Panase says, have another one. And he has a lay down. And that's the end by TKO. Saladin Panase is so fucking good. And if you saw his fight with someone like Robert Richella, who's in the UFC now, by the way, just pushed him to the fence and said, throw something at me, and then pulled and countered with like a body kick. He's lightning fast. So I really hope that, this is the thing, he was so low down the card, they should have slotted him in like, this is it. Maybe have Ngannou, Co-Main, Parnasse, and then Mike Perry, Nate Diaz before them to sort of like open up the main card. Yeah, Rebeles de Spain beating up the ghost of Junior Dos Santos. Very sad stuff. We have to pretend that Rebeles de Spain is good now. Junior Dos Santos is a great lesson for everyone, because whenever someone says like Francis Ngannou fucked his legacy or whatever, Junior Dos Santos was UFC heavyweight champion. He defended it. He was looking unstoppable for a little while. He was with the UFC for like 18 fights, and they were still headlining shit with him. And then he left. And who has ever said anything about Junior Dos Santos' legacy? No one. The whole legacy thing is just bullshit to try and get fighters. I mean, it doesn't get fighters to ignore money, which is good, because it would be fucking stupid to do that. So then the UFC card, honestly, couple of good fights on this card. Arnold Allen versus Melky Costa. Not the most action-filled fight in the world, but Arnold Allen demonstrating that he is very, very good against a good opponent. Melky Costa's on a great run, just stopped Dan Ige and Morgan Charrier. Basically, everyone he's fought in his last 6 fights has been a name. Fili, Rodriguez, Erosa, Sharia, Ige. They're all sort of on the decline now. Maybe not Sharia. But Melky Costa is just like beautiful distancing, long kicks, southpaw work, does switch, but all kicks, frames, and movement. Arnold Allen came out, first 2 rounds weren't particularly special. Third round, his corner go, get your hands moving. And he starts walking up to Costa and pumping the jab. And Costa clearly can't see it coming. It's really fast. And he's jacking his head back. And Costa keeps trying to like move back to a bigger range so that he can throw some like running punches or long kicks. And Arnold Allen just keeps walking up to him and going, I'm going to jab you in the face. And anytime they got close enough, that hand just appeared where Costa's head was. And Costa's head would be half a foot back. You know, Allen's got this thing where people keep saying like, oh, if he had power, he'd be amazing. But he does have he's got decent power. His bread and butter is like the lean back 1-2. He doesn't really throw combinations much longer than that. I'd love to see him get to the body more. He used to do that more back in the day. Like he'd had this wide left he'd throw to the body. He was fighting another southpaw here, so that makes it a little bit more complicated. Used his wrestling decently. Melky Costa was good on the ground. You know, you've got to praise Costa's conditioning coming out of this because he was on the worst end of it for most of 5 rounds. And he was still pretty fresh in the 5th round. So if he improves technically, tactically, and so on, he'll be a monster because he's just not slowing down. I did like how Melky Costa was playing his guard in this one. It was something that I saw Charles Jourdain doing recently, which is interesting because this is how Charles Jourdain keeps wrapping up guillotines on people from the bottom. You know, we talk about how like Alexa Grasso laid underneath Shevchenko trying to wrap her head while her back was flat on the mat. Or rather, Grasso's back was flat on the mat and she kept trying to wrap Valentina's head under her armpit and it just wasn't working. You need to be able to sit up and create that opportunity with them pushing into you, or you need to, well, no, you do need to just sit up and make that happen. And one way that works, one way that I've seen working for Jourdain and now Melky Costa is from half guard with the knee shield. They'll bring their bottom leg out enough so that their knee is shelved on the opponent's hip, and they'll release the other leg and start sitting up on that side, or they'll drape that leg over as like a grapevine over the opponent's calf and start pulling their leg out and working on a Kimura on that side and then wrap the head with the guillotine. It's a very cool little system. I might have to write something about it. It's only sort of like the 2-3 techniques, but stand-up, Kimura, and guillotine is a legitimate trio of things that can mess you up. Co-main was Doo Ho Choi versus Daniel Santos. Daniel Santos, I liked this lad a lot, but I was watching him going, you know, I love that you're throwing 3 or 4 body shots at a time. I'm not sure throwing almost 100 strikes in the first round is particularly conducive, though, because body shots are valuable because they wear on people. But if you're not going to be there to enjoy the fruits of that, because you're exhausting yourself, that's a little bit problematic. You know, when you're throwing a wheel kick every other exchange and shit. So he's beaten up Doo Ho Choi for the most part, but Doo Ho Choi is like guard up, peeking through, and then occasionally you just go jab and pop Santos' head back, and you go, yeah, he's still there, he's still in this, he's waiting. And then the moment Santos started slowing down, Doo Ho Choi starts opening up with combinations, hits him with a beautiful right hand to the body, wins him, puts him down. There was a lovely left uppercut in here. I love Doo Ho Choi's left uppercut. I think it's fantastic. His boxing game is just lovely generally. He's really rounded it out since the days when he was just like a really good right hand over the top. But I'll be watching Daniel Santos. I really like what he was doing. Throwing in the singles and stuff too. It was just too frantic. And that's what you're going to run up against. It's like Terence McKinney, but over a slightly longer period. If you throw everything at them right off the bat, at some point you're going to slow down. Or they're at least going to see a crack in your offense. You can't throw offense constantly for 3 rounds, or God help you if you get to the main event scene 5 rounds. Juan Diaz versus Malcolm Wellmaker. Sad for Wellmaker because he had a hype train and it's just been derailed. This wasn't as complete as like Ethan Ewing just boxing him up and throwing him around last time. Ewing clearly was a very special talent. Juan Diaz, what he did show was something I was talking about last week, which is like to succeed as a grappler in MMA, you need to be able to lose boxing exchanges. You need to be able to lose boxing exchanges, keep moving your head and say, look, we're having a boxing match. There are so many guys in MMA who are just like, I'm going to throw my punches and then I'm going to shoot. And then if he comes back at me, I'm going to throw my punches and then I'm going to shoot. And if I can't land punches and he's landing punches on me, I'm going to defend and then I'm going to shoot. And that's just not how it works. You need him confidently opening up for you to duck in on his hips or under his armpits. And you need to be able to get out there, throw punches, make exchanges, and lose those exchanges. I mean, ideally you win them. I'm not saying choose to lose them. I'm saying that if you're losing on the speed, if you're getting beaten to the punch, you still need to go in there and go, right, here we are, we're trading. Oh, no, you got me again. We're trading. Oh, you got me again. What? Oh, I'm under your armpit. Because there were the 2 times he got to the back here were literally off boxing exchanges. He just ducked under a punch and ended up with his ear in the middle of Wellmaker's back. Who else was good at this? My boy Ricardo Ramos was pretty good at this. Getting boxing exchanges going and then just weaving under the return and sticking to the guy's back. Because think of how much easier that is than like dropping to a knee, shooting and trying to run the guy to the cage like Hamzat. Think of how labor intensive that is when you could just lose a couple of boxing exchanges, keep trying to hit him in good faith, and then duck when he comes back at you. Modestus Bukakas barely beat a guy off the regionals, who took the fight on short notice. Chaos Williams scored a quick knockout. Cody Brunches and Andre Petrosky, that is the most apex fight of all time. Petrosky now, the most likely outcome statistically, the most common outcome for his fights is him getting knocked out. Why is he still here? Because we pump out slop. And then I watched the women's fights on this, having not watched many women's fights this year at all, and they were all hard work. Alice De Leon, she actually looked pretty decent on the feet at several points, but man, when you're putting out things being like, first capsule lock ever in the UFC, blah, 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 that ain't a flex, mate. That is, how is someone in the UFC getting caught with this? That's like, there are certain things, like when Geronimo Dos Santos got on Sergey Haritanov's back, and Sergey Haritanov noticed that his feet were crossed, and crossed his legs over Geronimo Dos Santos' legs, and then hipped in until Geronimo Dos Santos tapped to basically a rotational toe hold, heel hook, whatever, on his legs. That is bum shit. Like, how are you doing that at this level? How are you doing a body triangle from close guard and letting them put your foot on the inside of their hips? Now, there's a caveat here because Anderson Silva actually played with this for a while. There was a fight in Brazil. I think it was Roman Carneiro. He would just look up Anderson Silva's record, and it's the one that he won by TKO strikes, ground and pound. But he used to play the body triangle from bottom guard, and he reached out and he pulled his own foot, like toe holding himself, inside of Roman Carneiro's thigh, and like extended Carneiro out and rolled into mount with what looked like a hip bump, but it wasn't really. The guy just got flattened out. But that's because the guy got flattened out. If the guy had like been strong in his posture and crawled up into him and put his knee in the middle of Anderson Silva's butt, Anderson Silva would have been in a lot of trouble. And Silva did stop doing that. He played a ton of body triangle from the bottom, but it was to stall. He never did that, like pull his foot to the inside position again, because it's an embarrassing way to get fucking tapped out or to destroy your own knee. But with that, and if you cross your feet from the back and the guy crosses his legs over it, if you are any good, if there's any money on the line at all, just eat the submission and try and win. Because tapping to it is incredibly bad look. It did look like it fucked up Viana's leg, to be honest, but I was just amazed that someone managed to get put in this position in the UFC. But anyway, rest of the card was sludge. Seeing reports that the Netflix MMA was like the most watched thing that weekend, and the UFC, this was the worst performing UFC card so far on Paramount, which I say is good, honestly. Like, I'm not rooting for Jake Paul. I'm not rooting for this particular MMA organization. I'm rooting for someone at Paramount to go, wake the fuck up. What are these cards? Come on, put some effort in. And it tells you a lot that the best thing that they can offer is still bodybuilding Conor McGregor, promising to come back for the 5th time, when he's not been serious about MMA since 2016. Right, I'm your boy Jack Slack. You tell me what we should talk about this week, because I'm not going to talk about fucking Rico Verhoeven versus Alexander Usyk, because it's a silly, silly fight. Now, granted, the last one of this kind was Ngannou versus Tyson Fury, but that had specific stuff that made it interesting. Ngannou is a monstrous hitter and can stop people from clinching him. Rico Verhoeven cannot stop people from clinching him, and relied on his low kicks incredibly heavily, and has a 20% knockout rate in kickboxing. So you tell me, if there's anyone you'd like to read about this week, I want to write something fun for the Patreon boys. But plebs, also offer your suggestions. I'm not going to do the most liked, because that'll just be like Valentina Shevchenko or some shit. I'm your boy Jack Slack, you're my boy, and I'll catch you later in the week if you're a Patreon boy, and I'll catch you next week if you're not. Sign up to the Patreon, support the podcast, be a boy. Just being happy that Gina Carano's healthy again. Bless.